Hey, you guys. All right. Today on my stream, I'm going to be covering a fantastic game here that's in this fantastic book here, Capablanca's Best Chess Endings. So, obviously, I'm not going to be reading the whole thing to cover, but I'm going to be covering just a few games kind of here and there to give you guys a general impression of the book, and then you can make a decision for yourself if you'd like to buy it. And in the meantime, I get to learn chess and make some content at the same time. Let's go ahead and get into it. All right, Capablanca makes it look easy. With the smooth, effortless skill of a born magician, Capablanca makes a few deft passes and the position on the board changes right before your eyes. In a few brief moves, Capablanca manages to obtain a queenside majority of pawns. This slight positional advantage is enough in his talented hands to be decisive. So on the board. Um, The pawns advance at every opportunity, and their steady progress eventually compels Marshall to give up a piece to prevent one of them from queening. The continuation from that point on is unusually interesting. In only 14 more moves, Capablanca, who has won a bishop for 2 pawns, weaves an airtight mating net around Marshall's king. Let's check it out. So d4, d5, and then there, here, here. Highly recommended by Tarash. This defense was used to good effect by Mises in his second match game with Rubinstein. All theory. Improving on Capablanca might be lesse majeste, but I don't know what that means, but I would suggest instead the development of the king side by going knight to f6, knight to f6, bishop here to g2, bishop f8 to e7, castles and castles. Okay? In the game, though, he goes for this instead. After right here, then bishop comes here to g2. We bring this guy out. There. And then now bishop here to g5. The stronger line discovered years later is actually, you guys want to take a guess at it? Rather than bishop g5, what do you think it would be? If you guys were thinking dxc5, you would be right. In the game here, and then let's see what the whole continuation though is. He says here, and then this move, and after this, then you go knight over here to a4. Bishop retreats back to e7. Now you go to this square instead. Castles, knight f3 to d4. And white's position is superior. In the game, however, he opts instead for this move right here. And now we play this nice and handy little move. We go with knight to e4. Exclamation mark. A good move which frees black's game. Takes. When anyone defending against the queen's gambit want a better position than this after just 10 moves, says Tarash proudly in the justification of his pet line, the Tarash defense. Knight e5, like this, but certainly not the move here takes due to knight takes c3, bx c2, queen x c5, and white's queen side is broken up, and these become targets. In the game, then, he's going to go with this move, knight to e5. In the Rubinstein-Mises game, white's move, rook a to c1 here, led to play which enabled Mises to exploit his positional advantage, pressure on the open file, and a queenside pawn majority. The continuation is interesting, the more so as Rubinstein, the giant killer, is not often beaten so quickly and decisively. The game after this one right here went like this. Knight takes c3, rook takes c3, and I'll stop reading the moves and just play them. There, and then we go like this. Here, this comes over this way. Rook takes, that's interesting. The almighty 7th rank. Exclaim. And white resign now in view of what might follow. Ooh. And white is helpless to ward off the threats against mate. So returning back to the game here. Instead of rook a to c1, he opts instead for the better move here. Or, yeah, I think it's the better move. Knight to e5. After this, now, we take this way. Grab it on d4. Okay. This is better than trying to break up white's pawns by means of this right here. Yeah, which worked last time. There. This takes. Here. Queen d7 to protect this. Pawn to f4. Castles. And then this comes up here. And white has a respectable game. Yeah, that was drastically different than the last time that came up. What made that different? What was the big difference there? It was drastically different looking than when we broke up the pawns before. It was in this position, right? Where if he had taken this way, then we were going to go here, here, and here. I guess just like you can break up the pawns, that's valuable, but if you have to spend a couple tempi to do it, and you gotta, let the pawns get out here and here, it's just not quite worth it. So breaking up the pawns can be useful, but it just depends on what you gotta pay for that, for you to judge if it's worth it or not. So we take right here. Okay, it looks kind of like a free pawn, but I guess they can take on e4 now, right? Yep. So he takes right here, and then we take right back, and now the opponent goes e3, but he should not play here instead because of this, and white's pieces, and 3 of white's pieces are attacked. Yeah. Zing, zing, zing. So after this, pawn to e3, and now we come into here, check. Interesting. So what happens if we just retreat? Just curious. What if we go like this? Then I guess takes, and then if here, now here would run into this. It's kind of interesting. A lot of these tactics, like they only work in like certain little situations. You change it by a little bit and it doesn't work as well. So after this, knight to f3 check, takes right here, there takes, queen takes, and now castles. Okay. Going for an endgame here. To which now the opponent goes like this. Marshall avoids the move, queen takes b7 as after, and I'll just play them instead of reading out each move. Wait, yeah, there, yeah, and then this. Black has a pass pawn and the rook on the 7th. That's good to know. I mean, I would think this is good for black, but I wouldn't know at first sight that this is like for sure desirable. I might hesitate for a moment before playing it because it's, I don't know, it seems plausible that maybe the rook can come over here and attack the pawn and stuff. Okay, good to know. So after right here, the rook comes over, targeting the pawn straight away, to which now we reply by going here. Queen there, and then this move threatens the move bishop here to h3, which would either lead to the exchange of bishops or would induce a weakening of black's pawn structure by pawn to f5 here. To which now Capablanca replies with the move queen to c7. Rook comes up here to c3, and now we have the ending. So in this book here, it kind of highlights like the ending position, which is terrific. Most books they kind of focus on either the opening or the middle game, but this one kind of begins the deeper discussion once you actually get to the ending. I'd be hesitant to call this an ending though. I mean, it's an ending is usually when it's safe for the king to come out, and it's not even close to that here. So they have a different definition of ending, it seems like. Capablanca has a slight positional advantage for the endgame in his queenside pawn majority. In most cases, a more effective weapon than a kingside pawn majority. Yeah, I guess that's true, right? You don't really think of like a kingside pawn majority, probably because the kings are there, and that sort of obstructs it a little bit. I'm not exactly sure. That's weird. I don't know why you think of the queenside majority as being stronger. Not sure what the basis is for that, but I agree with it. Black plans to get his queenside pawns rolling at every opportunity. An exchange of pawns leaves 2 pawns to 1, and a further exchange will leave him 1 pawn to none. So, yeah, you're just looking for pawn trades when possible here. The last pawn might then either promote to a queen or cost the opponent a piece to prevent it from doing so. Of course. Capablanca starts playing out his trumps, the queenside pawn majority. From now on, the pawns will push at every chance they get. The move pawn to a3, by the way, is not only to prevent the advance of this pawn when if here, then here takes, and then rook takes, queen takes. At times, this book seems a little bit intermediate. Still good, though. But in order to mobilize the queen rook. Right, okay. So because the bishop was attacking this pawn, so by going here, the rook can also come over. Sure. So after right here, then we're going to go pawn to c4. Now bishop comes here to f3. And white avoids the move b2 to b3. Yeah, I'm curious about this. It seems like that would be kind of handy. Because then queen here to a5 attacks the rook and also threatens to capture the b pawn here and here. Gotcha. White would be compelled to advance by the means of this move here, leaving his opponent with a protected pass pawn. Got it. All right, so it's not so easy to combat these queenside pawns as they come up the board. Bishop to f3, and then now we go like this. Rook f to d8. Takes command of the only open file. So small an advantage, it is hardly enough to be decisive, but it is the accumulation of these little advantages that brings an opponent to the breaking point and forces capitulation. Okay, so when you play for the endgame, kind of gradual style, you have to sort of be ready for these gradual, slow improvement moves with the mindset that you don't win the game instantly, and you just slowly make progress like this. Okay, so after right here, rook f to d8, then what do we have happening next here? This comes over, of course. Capablanca has full command of the board. His play is an example of how slight advantages should be utilized. Full control over the board? White seems to be contesting the center a little bit. I mean, black is certainly better. And it's handy. I mean, it's nice to kind of see a position where this queenside majority seems like the most pertinent thing. You know, usually when you try to get something like this rolling, then you end up with a lot of, issues in the center or on the king side. So it's nice to see an example where it's clear that, black has the trump card here and white doesn't with that queenside majority stuff. After right here, then pawn to g6. A necessary precaution, as the king may require heir sooner or later. It also renders feasible the continuation bishop e6 to f5, followed by rook to d8 to d2. Lacking the pawn move, there is the dreadful possibility of instead here rook to c2, bishop comes right here, and then queen to e8 mate. Yeah, a lot of these sidelines are pretty intermediate. So then after this here, then we go like this, and then here, and then we go right here, queen to c6. Okay, wait a second. Why is white voluntarily allowing the trade of queens? Also interesting here. This is a little bit counterintuitive since also black is voluntarily putting his pawns the same colors as bishop. So I think that's what makes this a little bit more impressive too. Because so far at first glance it seemed like, well, anybody can make these moves. But I think a lot of us would be hesitant to put the bishops, to put the pawns the same color as the bishop. I guess he's just hopeful that this doesn't matter as much because we're going to trade bishops later. Maybe that's a strategy. I don't know. Queen c6 sure looks strange though. That kind of seems to be going right in hand with Black's plan to go for the end game here. Let's see what he says about it. He says, of course not the move here, preventing the enemy invasion of the rook to d2. As after this, then you go here. Yeah, a lot of these sidelines are kind of geared towards the masses. So if you're, if you're a more intermediate player, then this still may be perfectly helpful for you as well. And if you're an advanced player who kind of considers them as someone who doesn't necessarily understand the end game all that well, like myself, this can be good for you as well. All right, so after right here, then rook. So then he goes here. Okay, but my question is, why did he have to go here? Oh, interesting. So then even after this, he actually Capablanca avoids the trade of queens. Interesting. So then he must explain it in that note there, I guess. Black avoids the immediate exchange of queens as he must then lose a pawn in protecting his b pawn. All right, so white plays here because black really can't simplify for the endgame. Since if takes, he loses a pawn protecting this. Okay, how does that work? So here, and then maybe now a4. How do we lose a pawn out of this? I mean, I suppose just right here and then... No, I'm not seeing it. Hold on a second. Avoids the immediate exchange of queens as he must then lose a pawn in protecting his b pawn. Can't say I'm understanding that. I mean, I can see how this would be not so great. Maybe, but actually even after this, then we're protecting the b pawn. So I'm not entirely sure why this would be undesirable. All right, let's enlist the help of the computer right here. Here, and then a6 is good, or even right here is good. So then, yeah, okay, this is a hair better, but you could still play this. So I'm not sure what that comment meant. Not a whole lot there. And then, as I suspected too, this move was a little bit suspect, moving the queen right here. Could have gone king g2. All right. Good to note. So after right here, better than even trading the queens is to go right here, though. All right. So after this, then the queen comes back. Yeah, surely white is okay with just accepting a draw here. And then after this, now we trade. All right. So a little fancy finesse there. You want to get the trades, but you want to make sure that you kind of control the opponent's activity while you do so. According to the authorities, white should have a superior position, as his bishop controls squares of a different color than do his pawns. Squares of a different color than do his pawns. Yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying earlier. It does seem like white has the good bishop right here. Black, in violation of the precepts, has a bishop hampered by his pawns, nearly all of which occupy squares of the same color. Theory is theory, but life, alas, refuses to conform. The great master relies on his own instincts, makes up his own rules, and opens up new worlds. Ooh, cool. Well, after this here, okay, yeah. That's what I was going to say, is that he can trade away the bishops. What? I thought he was going to go bishop d5 there. The rook swoops down to get behind the enemy pawns. What? Why didn't he go for this? I thought the whole point was that you wanted to eagerly trade away this bad bishop thing. Huh. Huh, how about that? All right, so Capablanca is kind of teaching me stuff right here. He's saying, essentially, yeah, if you're playing for the end game, trading stuff down is good, but don't do it just, on a whim's notice or just all the time. Keep a careful eye and be mindful of activity and stuff like that. Because I would guess that after right here and then takes, it probably is kind of equal. Black's position is better, but maybe he can hold that rook end game. That sure is interesting, though, that he's not going to be trading away these bishops just yet. All right, so after this, the queenside pawns move ahead every chance they get. Notice that black maintains a strong initiative even though the queens are off the board. This guy comes back, and then we go right here. Okay, neat. All right. So yeah, despite these pawns being kind of on the same color as this bishop, the bishop is still an asset, and it's actually better than this one is right now. So just by moving the pawns a little bit, things kind of shift around to where it's clear that in some ways this one's actually better than this one. Cool. And then now he's eager to advance these pawns, though. After here, takes. Bishop retreats back here to f3. And if white tries the move instead of going king to f3, centralizing his king, threatening to drive the rook off, he might fall victim to this strange contretemps. Pawn to b3, here. What? When suddenly his rook faces capture by this move. Okay, so sometimes in the end game, you have these like obscure, stodgy looking, tactical things. This is not the kind of tactic you typically see work in like middle games and whatnot. So some of them are like almost like caveman tactics. I want to say it's like this just seems like beating you over the head with a club or whatever. It just seems so crude. But what are they supposed to do about it? Okay. Yeah, the other thing is usually when you're talking about trapped pieces like that, you're talking about like a big space advantage, and then swapping pieces off makes it easier. But sometimes you can still get trapped pieces in the end game, and it creates like a caveman stodgy kind of a, I don't know, emotional tonality to it. I feel like after instead bishop comes here to f3, now we push the pawn. Oh, we go here first. Then this comes here, and then now we push this one. The proper push. Just out of curiosity, so what's wrong with this one? Let's check what the analysis says. Okay. We actually could go here. Either one works. After this here, rook comes over here to d2. And then Marshall avoids instead playing a move like this when after rook b1 takes b2. This would take right over here, and then we play right here. Yeah. So even when there's only a couple pieces on the board, you still get these little, like, simple combinations. Nothing super flashy, and oftentimes the tactics don't really even involve the king, but just kind of like careful little maneuvering things that seem to, at least to me, from my point of view so far, seem to have a rather like shallow depth. Just taking note of things to be ready for. So then right here after this move, then they're going to go this way to d2. Again, not going for c3 because it's not so easy to actually win this guy. I guess that's the thing, right? It's like when you have a bishop that can attack the enemy pawns like this, like a good bishop versus a bad bishop, you would just generally think of like white as having an advantage here. So that's what makes this so fascinating, is that it's actually not that terrific to have this, and it's actually more of a plus for black that these pawns are these bishops are on the same color as the pawns. That's crazy. I don't know if I've ever really heard of that before. Because you would think with this type of pawn thing, this type of bishop situation, you'd want to swap these guys off as soon as possible. So that's fascinating to me. That's definitely really new stuff. And then one advantage of keeping the extra pieces on the board is that it creates some tactical stuff, some tactical possibilities that aren't really available when it's just rooks. Because sometimes if there's a way you can win the rook for your bishop, then that's great incentive to leave it on the board. Okay, so after right here, then let me just cover up the move for a second. So how do you win this from here? Just c3 now? Because now he's making it seem too easy. I want to try to guess. Any guesses from the audience? I'm going to play c3. I don't know if it's this move or not. If c3 and then takes, and then here, then this. And that's going to lose. So maybe it's something like here, but then this move, and then maybe here with, I don't know, with the idea of like maybe doing a rook check to get this with tempo. But let's say he goes right here. Now this whole thing won't work because we don't have a check. So you can just take. Okay, glad I paused for a moment. It still remains a mystery to me. How exactly does he prove that we can win this here? Okay. He slides us over first. A lot of very patient moves, I noticed. A lot of very patient moves. Not a lot of like tactical striking blows, but just like a slow death, like a snake-like grip. So with the powerful threat of rook c1 to c2, a move which must be prevented at all costs. Now he plays right here. Okay. This seems to do the trick, but Capablanca has two strings to his bow. In the potential pass pawn, less to expand. But Capablanca has two strings to his bow in the potential pass pawns less to expand. Okay, I read that correctly. Now he goes here. Okay, so it's like you still do these tactical blows, but you play a lot more patient moves in the process than you normally would with tactical like play. Tactics still exist, but just at a slower tempo than you typically see of like attacking games. After right here and then here, now you play right here, b3 to b2. So this seems like another reason to sort of leave the bishops on the board, is that both the rook can become kind of a target for the bishop, and then also this bishop can become a target for the rook. You know, because if there's just a rook endgame, you wouldn't have something like this happen. So like, even when it's a bad bishop, it can actually create more winning chances. And so that, coupled with another advantage like a queenside pawn majority, it can actually be in your benefit to keep the bishops on. That's awesome. I mean, I've just never seen that work before, so it's great to see an example of that. After this here, then this guy is going to take right there, and now we go right here. Yeah, so this is interesting too. It's like a lot of time, I guess, so the other thing we're realizing is that the end game is kind of won in phases. It's like you have multiple little chapters within the end game stuff. You know, and this book outlined the end game as something that began on move 18. And so, you know, the game doesn't end for 50 moves. And this is now, what point was this? This is move 35. So this was at least one chapter between move 18 to 35. This is at least one chapter. But it's also, I mean, it's the very first moment in the game where he's actually ahead on material. That's wild. So in the end game here, it's like you not only just want to get ahead on material, we have to actually convert that. Fascinating stuff. I mean, this is definitely not resignable from White's point of view, so you got to prove it. Capablanca's treatment of the ending from this point on is a revelation. While keeping White busy in the defense of his passed pawn, Capablanca whips up an attack which drives the king into a mating net. All this done with so little material and in so few moves, making this ending the very best of its kind. It will repay study by master as well as by amateur. Yeah, cool. See, that's kind of the same thing I was saying a second ago. this is helpful for masters and for like intermediate players. Yeah, it's neat. It's a couple times in a row where I've it's like one step ahead of what the book was about to say. All right, in this position then, so this is the position here. And then now we're gonna go for here. Yeah, I mean, I would be kind of at a loss for what we're trying to do here, because this whole play along the diagonal seems all handy and nice, but he's gonna be able to boot the stuff out with F3, and so it's like, what do you just bring your king in and like try to pile in on this pawn maybe? I'd definitely be at a loss for like how to handle this. So after going right here, it banishes the rook from the bishop's file and the protection of the pawn. So after right here, you go like this. Again, we're kind of seeing an example of that, of like these little stodgy mini combinations with shallow depth and not a lot of sub-variations to it. Just like these little tiny 2 or 3 move tactics where you just push the rook away and then you win this. You know, that's something you don't really see at like an attacking game. Well, after right here, this enables black to occupy the file and attack the pawn. Okay, so you use these tactics sometimes to actually get ahead by a bishop, but sometimes you get it just to improve your position just by like a minuscule amount. And a lot of times in a game, especially if you use a lot of time on your clock to do that, it seems like not that practical. So it's great to see an example where he makes that, usable. Okay, so again here, I would be at a loss for what to do. This is defending here. The bishop is still on these same color complex here. So do you maybe play like G5? Is that what we're going to go for maybe? We have this check and then here, and win here. So maybe that's useful. But if the king comes up, like I said, I'm just at a loss for like how to convert this. So he does go for this check. And then the king does come up this way. And then we go right here. Yep, so another kind of stodgy, just gradual improvement. It's just like making the pieces just very incrementally better, I guess it makes sense in an endgame too, because, in the opening, you just want to evenly distribute out where you put your like moves, so you optimize all the pieces. And if a piece hasn't moved at all yet, you get a big improvement from doing that. But in the end game, on a regular basis, since you don't have the chance to do that, you want to do it, with these little incremental improvements. Neat. All right. The rook is in an ideal position on the 7th rank and behind the passed pawn. All right, so not only is it attacking this pawn, but it's attacking this pawn. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. Still not entirely sure how you win this, though. Still curious. After right here, and then he goes here. Every move is a picture. This begins the hemming in process and institutes the threat of a sudden mate by means of here check. This comes up. Here check, and then here, and then now here threatening this mate. Okay, but then he could play, because he can't go here because the bishop guard's there. Wow. All right, so again, principle of 2 weaknesses, I guess. Yeah, it's not enough to just have this. You want to also be going after the king. Another thing that's interesting here is that he's not necessarily moving his king just yet. Like when he's making these incremental, improvements of his pieces right here, he's improving this guy by, 10%, 10%. Whereas this one would improve by like 20%, 15%, 12% on each one of these turns. He's not really doing that. He's accepting, smaller improvements here and delaying this one. It's interesting. Karpov, I know, kind of does that too, where he doesn't necessarily try to get the maximum improvement out of each piece, like immediately. He kind of maximizes them a little bit out of order. It seems like to me sometimes, but it works, and it's like a better move objectively. So, so after this right here, now he's gonna go G4. Okay, my question though, why didn't he go? Oh, okay, I get it. If you go here, check first, then they can block, and you don't get H2. Okay, I get it. So then right here, Okay, another thing I guess that's interesting about this is that not only do you want to try to like get your own pieces a little bit better, but like you do in the opening, but you also have the chance to like improve your pawns. So every single one of them, there's like different lens that you use when trying to optimize them. Seems like anyway. And again, the thing that stands out about that is he's not moving like his, quote, weakest or like least developed piece necessarily. That's what catches my eye, at least. So after right here, then he's going to go like this. We're going to take, and then now he goes here takes. Okay, and then now we get this guy. Okay, so another kind of chapter completed, over the course of, what was that? Like 7 moves. Then he's got another pawn there. So it seems kind of like after the end game begins, you have like little 7-move chapters a lot of times. 7 or 8 move little chapters. After this here, now we go like this, and then here check. This comes this way. He should not, of course, play this move to g5 when after king to g7, he's going to have mate on next turn. Rook cannot go here because this powerful bishop. Yeah, and again, that's kind of interesting too. Like it's not really that relevant that the bishop can't attack these pawns. It just ends up being really active, This is just a very active bishop. It doesn't matter that it's on the same color as these pawns, because a lot of these little mini combinations, the ways that he's getting ahead just have to do with these little tiny like caveman-like tactics, and you prevent this kind of stuff. All right. Neat. Well, after right here, he does go back then to g3. And again, still, I mean, I can see why white plays on. Like, obviously, black's probably winning, but, they still have to prove it. After right here, now we're going to get this guy on over here. This move. And now it takes here. Okay. So sometimes when it rains, it pours. I mean, he cannot defend e3. So these little chapters, they do become like easier and easier. There takes. This comes this way. We bring up the king. Isn't that crazy? He waited so long to move that king. There was so many rook moves and pawn moves. So I guess in the end game, don't feel obligated to like follow the same opening principle. Kind of thinking of like, don't move the same piece twice. In the end game, you can break that rule regularly. So after this, then here check. This comes up. Relentlessly precise to the last move. Instead, if you had played this move, then the move rook over here to e7 pins the bishop. Is that big of a deal? Why is that big of a deal? Here. It's going to get a stalemate? He gets a stalemate here? Wow. Here. Again, kind of a little caveman tactic. Like a little tiny petite combination. Okay. Is he still winning though? I want to know, like, is he still winning if we check the analysis? Yeah, he's still winning. He can just go here to c1. That would still work. He just has to like, yeah, okay. How much better is king to f6? Not a whole lot better. Yeah, I mean, this works. He's just showing that he's like aware of the different little moves and whatnot. So also in the end game, I guess, like, don't feel obligated to like put your king on as safe as possible of a square. That might not necessarily be the simplest. So then after right here, then game is almost done. Rook comes here to d7. Now we put this guy here, and white resigns. Ooh la la. Okay. So forget this pawn. We're going for mate. I like that. If then here check, which would be the fear of putting the king on this spot, then after this check, then here, if here, then there, here, followed by this for mate. or if instead white opts to continue on by going with the move king to g5 in this situation, then you go here, check. This comes up this way, and then you have mate anyway. Wow. Caveman tactics. little tiny armies. Okay, cool. Well, hope you guys enjoyed that. I think that'll end it for today. Yeah, I'll play some viewers if you guys want. We got a little bit of time, so send me a challenge.